Okay, so thank you to Esther Elagurovich for sponsoring today's class, and it should be a merit and a source of bracha for her and her family. And we are dedicating this class to our sponsors' parents, Chaim ben Nechama and Batya Bat Manya. At the end of this class, we will be saying Tehillim together, God willing, and at that time we will be able to have everyone open their videos and their chats. Until that point, please don't open your videos because we're having a problem with Zoom, and we will immediately go to a gallery perspective, and it will not look great on the recording. So thank you so much. Okay, so today's psalm is Psalm 55. And this is a segula for our enemies receiving what they deserve. Okay. What they deserve isn't necessarily what we think they deserve. Rather, it's what Hashem decides they deserve. But when we reflect back after our enemies have been defeated, we often see that indeed it's apparent to our eyes they get what they deserve. Please, Hashem. Okay. So we are going to briefly begin with the story of the treachery of Achitophel, I think in English, and Avshalom, David's son's treachery as well. And this story is told in Shmuel 2, which is Samuel 2. It begins kind of in 14, towards the end of chapter 14, and goes through 17. Now, there is a lot more to the story, a lot more background, because Avshalom, or Absalom in English, Avshalom, David's son, has his own attack on David at the same time, and the attack with Achitophel overlap and co-join. Yet at the same time, we're focusing on Achitophel. So who was Achitophel? He was an advisor to David. He was a great Torah scholar. He was brilliant, and he was a very, very good friend of David's. And the difference between this betrayal and the betrayal we've discussed in previous chapters, such as the betrayal of Doeg and the betrayal of the Ziphim, or the Ziphites, and even the betrayal of Shaul, King Saul, this betrayal really hit David hard because Achitophel was a very good friend. If you have ever been betrayed by a friend, you know that that is the betrayal that stings. The betrayal of Hamas, we're ready for it. But the betrayal of somebody close to you and intimates, as someone that you've confided in, somebody that you've learned Torah with, is extremely painful. Now, in this psalm, David expresses this pain. So let me give you a little bit of the story, and we'll be going into the history a little deeper as we continue. So Avshalom had killed his brother, which David was very upset about. It's a long story. And he had gone against David. But then he tried to make nice with David, and he decided to pretend to coexist with David, all the while plotting against him. Now, Achitophel saw an opportunity. He saw an opportunity to finally usurp David and become king himself. And all along, he had either been pretending to be David's friend while they learned Torah together, or he genuinely was David's friend and changed his mind. But he decided that he wanted to be king. So what did he do? He started by feeding the false hope to Avshalom, David's son, that he could be king. And all he had to do was kill his father. I'm going to let this person in. I'm not quite sure who this is. If you've signed in, please do not put on your video. Thank you. And he has been, and so he had, I'm sorry, I'm so distracted today because of the problems with Zoom. It's really something that I'm hoping will be resolved soon. So he had this this situation where he decided to make Avshalom believe that he could take over his father's kingship. Really, the idea was to let Avshalom do the dirty work, fight the battle against his father, and then Achitophel would come along and just kill Avshalom. This is a very twisted mind. He was a brilliant man, and he was consummately evil and narcissistic. There's no two questions about it. And he wanted David's power, and he wanted the kingship. Now, what happens in the story is that he does begin to foment this war against David. And Avshalom ends up not following the advice, the battle advice of Achitophel, who was a brilliant tactician. And somehow he decided to follow the advice of a double agent who we will learn about later on as we go through the psalm. And because of that, well, I'll tell you, I'll leave the cliffhanger and tell you what happens as we go through the psalm, but you need to know that there's a battle going on. Okay, so let's begin. A lot of notes here today. Lamnatseach bin ginos maskil leDavid. As you will recall, this is the same opening verse as last week. For the conductor on the Neginos, a maskil of David. And if you remember what a maskil is, we're going to be getting some intellectual information here. And the Neginos are instruments, Neginot, you might pronounce it, are instruments that alleviate depression because their tone is so sweet. Okay. Ha'azina Elohim tefilasi va'al tis'alam mitechinasi. Incline your ear, God, to my prayer, and don't disregard my pleas. So the Midrash tells us that David actually believed, this is the Midrash Sachar Tov's opinion, that David believed Achitophel was greater than him. There are other opinions. And he was afraid when he saw that he conspired with his son. And so he was pleading with Hashem because he felt he was going against somebody much greater. Okay, continue. Hakishiva li va'aneni, ari b'sichi va'ahima. Okay, pay me heed and answer me. I lament as I speak and I moan. So Rashi and most commentators translate arid as to lament, to mourn verbally, okay? But some say arid is related to rada, which means to rule, which makes the verse translated as I rule my fate with my words of prayer. In other words, David believes his own prayer is what's going to determine his fate. And that's, of course, what was it most interesting to me, the most interesting commentary, because it's, I think, a very Breslov commentary, in that this idea of tefillah is something that isn't just we do it and we trust in Hashem. No, we have to put everything into our tefillah, and we have to even plead with Hashem to help us formulate the words of our prayer. Okay, and we know that Reb Noson said that when he sees a lack, what does he see? He sees a lack of prayer. I always keep that in mind when I'm davening for something, whether spiritual or material. Maybe I'm not davening sincerely enough. Maybe I'm not davening enough. But if I am able to click and it is appropriate, then I will have ruled over, so to speak, the outcome of my prayer. Obviously, it's Hashem. Now, also this verse is alluding, it's hinting, I moan. It says to David when he went up Har Hazesim, the Mount of Olives, and he covered his head and he went barefoot, as his whole entourage did, in mourning and grief. I mean, when we string together, if we just pulled out the parakim of the chapters of Psalms that had just the history of what was going on with David, we can get quite a picture of the torment that he went through. I mean, his family pursued him. He had political enemies. His friends betrayed him. And all of this is bound up in, according to his enemies, this is their excuse, that he sinned with Bathsheba. That's their excuse. That's their justification and rationalization to pursue David. And it seems like there are times where David believed this. And it seems also like there are times where David said, no, I've done tshuva, my sin is forgiven, I am righteous. And as we skip through them, we see that these times, we don't know for sure the order in which the Psalms are supposed to be read, number one, or for sure which are historically in order. There's some debate about that. So we get this picture of him sort of skipping all over. And, that's very powerful, because that mirrors our personal path of tshuva. Sometimes we feel like, finally, I really feel like I've done tshuva. And other times we feel, as Rebbe Nachman tells us, well, now we can do tshuva on the tshuva because we understand more. So maybe we have to work a little bit harder at it. So I just think that even the construction of Sefer Tehillim is a message to us in this regard. Okay, we are going to continue. Okay, we're on verse 4. Mikol oyev mipnei akav rasha ki yamitu alai aven uvaf yistimuni. Okay. At the shout, the voice of the enemy, because of the oppression of the wicked, for they accuse me of iniquity and they hate me with a vengeance. So David, when he fled from Avshalom, was cursed by Shimei ben Gera, and Al-Sheikh says this is referring to those curses, okay? And the gist of this, again, is that they felt justified in hating David because of his sin with Bathsheba. Okay. I see that the chat is open and Doris is saying she's having problems with the sound. If you please don't open your video or speak, because again, it will distort the view again into gallery. But if you feel like opening chat and letting Doris know whether you can hear or not, that would be helpful. I hope you can hear. Okay. Now, there again, we have to remember that they're looking for an excuse to hate him. Now, Rav Hirsch says this hatred, this yistamuni, he says something fascinating. He explains it as being related to satum or sasum, okay? Samech tes vav mem. And this word means to seal up or to be sealed up, closed off. And therefore, says Rav Hirsch, this is a kind of hatred that was sealed up in the heart, but is now unhinged and out there. And when, of course, when I read this, what did I think about? The anti-Semitism explosion that we saw. I don't know if anybody saw what just happened in Teaneck. I mean, it's insanity. Nobody's getting arrested for it. But the explosion of anti-Semitism that was quiet. They weren't saying it out loud. Okay. So we have this special kind of hatred, a hatred where people keep their lips sealed until they're given permission to unleash. And this was the hatred that this was the hatred that was unleashed against David. I'm sorry, I'm being so distracted today because today I have to let people in because I can't access Naomi Batia to do it for me. If you've just joined the chat, please do not put your video or your sound on. I mean, you can hear the video. Please keep yourself muted and your own personal video muted because we're having problems with Zoom, technical problems. Thank you. Okay. Okay, I'm going to continue. I'm sorry about all the difficulties today. Just one technical thing after another. Okay, let's continue. Libi yachil bikirbi ve'emos maves nafalu alai. My heart shudders within me, and terrors of death have fallen upon me. Obviously, David is afraid that he's going to be killed. We will continue. Yira v'ra'ad yavo vi vatchaseni palatsus. Fear and trembling penetrate me, and I'm overcome with horror. Fear has entered him. It's no longer just that surface fear. It's gone quite deep. Okay, so David is, he's really revealing his inner world to us. When do we ever get this kind of maybe really this, I don't know that we get it so much, this kind of expression of the inner world of a tzaddik? Rebbe Nachman gives it to us, Reb Noson gives it to us, but not all the tzaddikim do. So it's very important for us to hear this and know that they have the same feelings that we do at times. We all have fears at times. Okay, let's continue. 7. One of the most beautiful verses in all of Sefer Tehillim, in my opinion. Va'omar mi yiten li ever kayona a'ufa ve'esh kona. So this is just so beautiful. And I said, if only I had wings like a dove, I would fly away and be at rest. Who hasn't felt like this? If only I could escape my problems, if only I could go somewhere. I think this, sometimes I hear this from younger students in their teens and 20s. If only I could just go away and move and start over and da-da-da. Of course, we take everything with us. But David continues, Hine archik nidod alim bamidbar salah. Behold, I would wander far away, and I would dwell in the midbar, in the wilderness, in the desert forever, Selah, which Selah may mean forever. And again, we discussed last time that it might mean a notation to the choir to repeat the verse. And so let's talk about the halacha. So let's talk about how a Jew is supposed to live. We are required to live among other Jews, because we need all the infrastructure of the community in order to live as Jews. You need a mikveh, you need a yeshiva, you need a shul, you need the chesed organizations, and also not just to enable you to do mitzvahs in general, but specific mitzvahs, to engage in mitzvahs with other Jews. This is important. Now, there are exceptions throughout our history where there have been times where people have had no choice but to travel abroad or to live in areas to earn a living. Okay, today most people do have a choice, and most rabbis advise that unless you, let's say you're a Baal Tshuva and you work for somewhere not in a Jewish community, and it would be, you've tried to find a job in a Jewish community, most rabbis advise, okay, so stay there for a while and daven, okay? But there can be actually a reason to dwell in the midbar. And the Rambam explains, if you live in some kind of wicked community, Jewish or non-Jewish, let's assume it's not Jewish, please, you should go out and dwell in the wilderness. So if you are going to be influenced negatively by people, you have an obligation to live in the wilderness, so to speak. But in general, a Jew must live in a community, and it has to, again, have that infrastructure. If you've just joined us, some people have joined us, please do not turn on your personal video or unmute yourself. We are having technical problems with Zoom today. Thank you. You can turn on the video to see me, though. Okay, let's continue. Verse 9. Achisha miflat li meruach soa misar. I would quickly find myself a refuge from a violent wind and from a tempest. So I would just like to tell you what I thought when I saw this verse, that this soa misar is alluding to the ruach sa'ara, which of course is the storm wind that Rebbe Nachman speaks about, and it comes from Ezekiel, the book of Ezekiel. And Rebbe Nachman in Likutei Moharan 38 and elsewhere, he alludes to this. This storm wind is blemished speech. When speech is not appropriate, the storm wind is the great accuser. So it's not a great thing. So when we speak inappropriately, we stir up the sun, and from it comes all accusations and tests, says Rebbe Nachman. And it comes us to become, it defeats us spiritually, whether we are on the receiving end of it, God forbid, or on the speaking end of it, God forbid. And this causes us, it affects ourselves, not just spiritually and emotionally, but also physically, says Rebbe Nachman. And I would like to just share with you something that he says. People who judge their fellow men unfavorably and constantly scrutinize other people's shortcomings are from the aspect of an end to all flesh. And the idea is judgment, libel, slander, gossip, lashon hara of any kind, snide remarks or open remarks. All of this, says Rebbe Nachman, is the ruach sa'ara, and we have to be careful with it. We have to be very cautious. It's not always so easy. Even Reb Noson, I was reading today in Likutei Tefillos, Reb Noson's book of Tefillos, of prayers based on Rebbe Nachman's lessons. I was reading today about the Reb Noson says that he himself has slipped and spoken, has humiliated someone publicly, and how he tries not to. I can't even imagine him doing it, but okay. And he made a prayer out of this aspect of this lesson. So it's a very serious, it's a very serious issue. And today, because everything is just a click away, oh my goodness, it's doubly serious, because normally times where we wouldn't be communicating with people, we are. People have 5 minutes. Okay, we should all be picking up a book of Psalms and saying to them, but we're not. Sometimes we're texting on our phones. Let's be real. Let's be honest. So we have more and more opportunities to stir up this storm wind. So we have to be careful. Okay, let's continue. Verse 10. Sorry, I'm having so many problems seeing today as well. Bala Adonai Palag Lishonam, Ki Ra'isi Hamas, Viriv Ba'ir. Okay. This is such an interesting verse. Consume, Lord, confuse their tongue, for I have seen violence and strife in the city. This prayer was fulfilled quickly because Hashem did consume and confuse them. The enemies began to argue among themselves, and the factions developed. Why and how did this happen? So I'll tell you how this happened. There was someone that David met when he was fleeing, Avshalom and Achitophel, and this was Hushai Ha'arki, Hushai the Archite. And Hushai wanted to walk with David, but he was an older man and he couldn't keep up. And David said to him, listen, you're messing me up here. You're holding me back. I know you want to help me. Here's how you can help me. Go back to Jerusalem, back to Jerusalem, and tell my enemies that you're now siding with them. And then get word out to me what their movements will be. Now, David himself was a master tactician. Okay, he employed a double agent. And so this Hushai went back to Avshalom's palace, and he said to him, I'm on your side, and he gained his trust. And at that point, Achitophel had given David some really good battle advice about how to defeat. Achitophel had given Avshalom some really good battle advice about how to defeat David. He laid out a strategy for him about what his army should do. And Hushai said, no, here's what you should do instead. And he laid out this crazy Mishigas plan that didn't make sense. So everybody was advising Avshalom to follow Achitophel, this brilliant warrior. And instead, Hashem put the idea in Avshalom's head that he should follow this plan of Hushai. And he did. And he followed this bad attack plan. And that was the confusion and the factions that developed and all the breakdown of the enemy. And they were very quickly defeated because of this. Okay, it wasn't long after, when the enemy is united, which we'll speak about elsewhere. Maybe actually we'll speak about it here. Let me see. So when anybody's united, when anybody has unity, they can defeat the others or stand strong. We know that. So we don't want to be divided. And what David did was his spy divided his enemies. And this violence and strife in the city, commentators tell us, this infighting, this conflict, this lashon hara, hatred, jealousy, David knew that this would be their downfall. He was a psychological, not just a spiritual warrior, which he was. He was a psychological warrior. He knew how the minds of people worked. And as we go through, we're already at Psalm 55. We're a third of the way through the Psalms. So we understand that David really understood people. Okay, let's continue. Yomam v'layla yisovevuha al chomoseha va'aven va'amal bekirba. Day and night they surround it on its walls, and iniquity and mischief are in its midst. Okay, so he's saying that the bad guys have seemingly taken over Yerushalayim. I'm going to continue. Havos bekirba velo yamish merechova toch umirima. So Havos. So Havos, Havos, I didn't say Havos. I said Havos. Havos is treachery. It's betrayal. And it's, again, a constant theme throughout these Psalms. And a constant theme, why? Because David's life was filled with this kind of Havos, this kind of treachery from those close to him. Treachery is within it, and fraud and deception do not move out of its square. And so everybody was embroiled in fraud and deception. And we see that David, yes, he employed his own double agent for the purpose of good, to protect the holy kingship. And I mean, after all, he's the root of Mashiach. But we also see on the other side, Achitophel and Avshalom, to a certain extent, are deploying fraud and deception. And they feel free to discuss this in the public square. It's not a problem, okay, for them, because they feel like everybody's on their side. Now, what I will say is that people began to change their minds. People were on Avshalom's side. He was younger. He was very, very handsome. He was charismatic. And some people did want to go with him, okay? But they did change their minds. Now, Radak explains that the word toch, fraud, literally means mirma. So we have these two words, the toch and the mirma. So why does it say fraud and fraud, or lies and lies? So Radak gives us an etymology here. He says toch, well, it's not an etymology per se, but he says that toch literally means inside. Okay, it literally means inside. Sometimes it can literally mean the backside, and it is synonymous with mirma, but the toch is a kind of lies that lie inside and then worm their way out. So again, we have so much doubling on here. So if we were to study this as a piece, just as a piece of literature, which we're not, obviously, but if we were, we would see there's doubling upon doubling. There's the doubling of the double betrayal of Achitophel. He's going to betray not only David, but Avshalom, and then David sending this Achai to be a double agent. And then we have these words, the hidden hatred in the heart that gets unleashed, and the hidden lies that remain inside until they're allowed to be expressed. So we really have, I really feel even using the word literature is disrespectful. But when you do study literature, you would think of this in the term of literary devices, chas v'shalom. I should say lahavdil. It's really not. But we see this a lot of back and front, up and down, hidden and revealed going on here. Okay, let's continue. It's such an interesting, powerful psalm. Kilo oyev yecharafeni ve'esa lo misani alai higdil ve'esaser mimeni. For no enemy can revile me that I can endure. No enemy can grow so great against me that I need to hide, okay, or that I need to go into hiding from him. So various commentators translate this differently. And most say this is just, I'm going to not go into all the details because we want to be able to get through this today, but most say that this was an expression of shock that Achitophel, who was such a great man, could do this, okay? David's just floored by this, because remember, all the news is coming back to him as he's giving us sort of an overview of the events. Okay. So this verse also expresses this much more clearly. Va'ata enosh ke'erki elufi yudai. And you're a man of my measure. Okay. My equal, a man of my equal, my measure, my guide, and my beloved, intimate friend. So Achitophel learned Torah with David. And even though David was truly the greater Torah scholar, we are told that some believe that David believed that Achitophel was greater in some ways. There's other opinions too, which I will get to. And also he entrusted him with his intimate secrets. Have you ever had that friend that you could just let your hair down with? Okay. You could just giggle with at silly things, and you could tell them when you were feeling sad, and you could, we shouldn't, of course, talk badly, God forbid, about another person, but if you needed to vent, you were able to say, I'm having this problem with someone. Could you help me? Could you listen? Okay, so we've all had friendships like this. Can you imagine the person, the repository of all this heartfelt confession? Okay, it's the one who stabs you in the back. Horrible. It's a horrible feeling. Okay, let's continue. Give me one moment. Okay, Yira v'ra'ad yavo vi vatechaseni palatsus. Fear and trembling. No, what am I doing? I'm reading Vav. I'm so sorry. Let me read 15. Asher yachdav namatik sod. Beves Elohim nechalech beragesh. So that together, okay, with whom together, that together, we would share sweet counsel in the house of Hashem. We would walk with a multitude. We would walk with company. So Rashi says that they would dive deep into Torah together, and this was the sweet counsel, the sweet sharing. And we have to understand also that another opinion, that David didn't necessarily think that Achitophel was greater than him in some ways, that David really did recognize that he was the greater scholar, and that Achitophel had moments of brilliance and that he wasn't quite there spiritually. And it said that David realized, he trusted him anyway, but he wasn't really, did he really have a moon in B'tochen? That doesn't seem like it. So there's a question from David whether he recognized that Achitophel might have a touch of heresy, okay? But he had respect and love for his teacher. And because Achitophel did teach him some Torah, so David accorded him all the respect one accords someone who teaches them Torah. And as Rebbe Nachman says, it's like a parent to you, or parent to us. And so David also felt, according to Radak, that no counsel, nothing he had, no advice he had, no plans he had, was sweet until he discussed it with Achitophel. And we see here he was allowed to walk out with a multitude or in company. What does this mean? David respected Achitophel so much, even for teaching him a word or two of Torah, even though David was the greatest Torah scholar, that he was allowed to walk out in front of the entourage by David's son. So the king walks in front of his entourage. The entourage has to go behind him. He's the king. And his bodyguards are behind him. He's the king. But David allowed Achitophel to walk right by his side. So you can imagine the trust he placed in him to accord him that honor, and the love and respect he had for him. Okay. Now, I want to say something about this. because we see this terrible betrayal here. Sometimes relationships do end, unfortunately, in a horrible note. Sometimes relationships end on just a sort of you drift apart note. Rebbe Nachman teaches that people come into our lives for periods of time. Some last a lifetime. Some come in later in life and last till the end of life. We should live till 120 and beyond, please Hashem. Sometimes come in the middle and stay around for a while and then drift apart. Some you have childhood friends that you force that connection with because you want to maintain that connection, but really you're very, very different. It's very rare that a person has their friend a whole life. And Rebbe Nachman says this isn't a reflection on the person per se. Doesn't mean that you're not a good friend or that the other person isn't a good friend. It's a reflection on the idea that we all have a lot to accomplish in our lives, not just materially, but spiritually. And in order to do that, we have to join forces with other souls. And we are also not only in this life, but also sometimes doing the work of past lives in this life. And we have to correct things from past lives. We have to correct the mistakes in this life first. Don't just run to the past life explanation, by the way. People love to do that because it feels like it's letting you off the hook. Now, run to this life explanation for why you're facing challenges. But a past life can enter into it too. And so the Rebbe says that this will happen. And he also mentions elsewhere that sometimes people will like learn from a tzaddik, and this was his experience too. They'll learn from a tzaddik, they'll take something from that tzaddik, but they won't necessarily have this soul root attachment to the tzaddik, that this enduring attachment. But whatever they learn, they take with them because it's valuable for them, and then they can go spread it in their worlds and so on. So, you know, betrayal is hard, and hopefully nobody has to experience that. However, know that not every relationship is meant to last. And there are many reasons why not, for you and for the other person. And I think that having that perspective in mind, I'm not saying that's not sad when a good relationship, a loving relationship drifts apart, or God forbid has a betrayal like David had with Achitophel. But what I am saying is that to keep this in mind, it makes it a little less bitter. Okay. All right. Let's continue. Verse up to, we're up to 16. Okay. Yashi Mavis Alemo. Yeredu Sheol Chaim, Ki Raos Binguram Bikirbam. Okay. So may he incite, put death against them. May they descend to the grave or the lower places alive, because for evil is their dwelling within them. Okay. So may he incite death against them. He's asking Hashem that they die. I'm going to gloss over this because we want to get through more verses. That they die. May they descend to the grave alive. We always think of Korach when we think of that, but that's for the worst traitors, really, that kind of death. And there is evil in their dwelling, and it dwells within them. And so please, may justice be done. And this prayer was answered rather quickly. When Achitophel found out that Absalom didn't follow his plans, but went with the double agent's plans, he knew that he would be, that Absalom would lose and that David would kill him, that he knew that it was over for him. So what did he do? He went home and he committed suicide. It's rather shocking. Okay. So I think that the act of suicide in this instance shows that he really was not a man of faith. He perhaps was what Rebbe Nachman refers to as a scholar demon, someone who's a great chacham, who's very wise and brilliant and clever, but it doesn't go below the neck. Okay, there's no heart in his learning. There's no heart in his Torah. Because if he had faith and he had heart, he did something wrong, he would do tshuva and face the consequences in this world rather than submit himself to the consequences of Hashem. Okay. And, we've all done wrong, but far better we should do tshuva in this lifetime than we should, God forbid, not do tshuva in this lifetime. Okay, let's continue. Ani el Elohim ekra vadonai yoshieni. I shall call to Elohim, and Hashem will save me. So these two names are used here. I shall call to Elohim to dispense justice, and I'm going to use Hashem's name. Hashem will save me. I'm calling using that name for mercy, for compassion, which of course we know Elohim is the name of justice, and Hashem's name is the name of mercy, compassion. Okay, another interesting verse. What time it is? What time is it? We're getting late. Okay. Erev vavoker v'tzaharaim asicha v'ehemen vayishma koli. So evening, morning, and noon, I supplicate, I plead, and I moan, and he hears my voice. So this is, of course, the morning prayers, afternoon prayers, and the evening prayers. And the way it's expressed here, alluding to Shachris, Mincha, and Mariv, it's giving us this idea of all day long. And very interesting. Okay, when we read it, it sounds like David saying evening, morning, and noon. That's all day long. Of course, our days start in the evening. The Jewish calendar starts in the evening. So why? So I guess to me, this is because prayer is the main point of our day. And in those days, people davened a lot more. People prayed a lot more. We are told that people would spend an hour preparing for prayer. I mean, there are some people who do so today, by the way. There are different paths to do that. But just to ready your mind to engage in prayer, which of course is prayer is a very deep meditation. So I think that, because prayer is the fulcrum upon which all the other stuff of the day is supported, I think that's obviously why David says it like this, but it's a reminder to us on the centrality of prayer to our day. And of course, Rebbe Nachman teaches us many, many things. And one of the things he teaches us is the power of and the importance of tefillah, not just the prayers from the Siddur, which we are obligated in, but also hitbodedut, which we are also obligated in, and that is to spend time each day talking to Hashem about whatever's on our mind and in our heart. Okay, let's continue. Pada v'shalom nafshi mikirav li ki virabim hayu imadi. He redeemed my soul with peace from battles drawing near me for the sake of the masses who were with me. The Midrash follows Rashi's translation here and says that, what are these battles? So he's going inwards, okay? The Midrash is going inwards and Rashi's hinting to it with his translation. What are these battles coming close to me? Really, they're drawing inside me. They're battles that are inside me. These are the battles we could say with the Yetzer Hara, but the Midrash says that these are the negative angels we create with our own transgressions. They're the things we do that we shouldn't be doing. We create negative angels, okay? And yet, still Hashem saves us. Why? Because of the masses who were with me. Who are they? The angels that we create with the mitzvahs that we do. Okay. So Hashem always rules on the side of mercy for his people and for us as individuals. And so he is not going to allow the prosecutory angels is quite a mouthful, to have the upper hand if at all, if that at all can be helped. Okay, that's a whole other subject, which we can maybe do a class on sometime. It's very interesting. Also, we can understand this simply as those who were with me, for their sake, may Hashem save me. For everybody who davened for my success, may Hashem save me. You know, that's what David's saying here also on the simple meaning. Okay, let's continue. Yes, I should continue. Yeah, I just want to maybe skip around a little bit, but we'll go to verse 20. Yishmael v'ya'anim v'yoshev kedem salah asher ein chalifos lamo v'lo yar'u Elohim. It's a very interesting verse. May God hear me. May God hear and answer them. He who is enthroned from days of old. May God hear and answer them. It's actually to be read as humbled them. He who is enthroned from days of old, Salah, those that there is no change in them and they fear not God. So there's another way of reading this. There's a way of reading this, of translating this, that the word chalifos, change, is part of the phrase that they don't necessarily want to change, and they want to ignore their own deaths. It's like that phrase and the next phrase. So it's going to take me too long to explain it word by word, and we're really running out of time. We're way over already. But the idea here is very important. David is asking that those who think they are immortal, says Rashi, who never think about their own deaths, their understanding is corrupted. And they think, says Ibn Ezra, to add to that, their good fortune can never change. There are people who just think, who they live like a leaf blowing in the air. Okay, it blows one way or it blows the other way. And they're in that moment. And they never think that the moment that they're in can change. So if they feel good, it's good forever. And if they feel bad, it's bad forever. Okay. And we know we have to embrace life's ups and downs with equanimity. Like, okay, it's good, but it's not permanent. Oh, it's bad, but also it's not permanent. Okay. So this idea here is that people who just think that they're going to live forever, and we see this, people think they're going to live forever, and they don't take it into account that they're not going to live forever. It's so interesting. I have a poster in my house. I really should have taken it down and shown it to you. It's a Hasidic poster in Hebrew with a Yiddish translation and explanation. And it's an Asher Yatzer poster. It's the prayer we say after we use the facilities when we wash our hands. And the prayer is, we're thanking Hashem for all our bodily functions. It's a very important prayer. Okay. Now, what's so interesting about this it's good to, by the way, read when you say a bracha, when you say a blessing, it's good to read it, even if it's memorized, which is why we have this poster up. And what's so interesting is this is for children. It's illustrated for children, this bracha. And it's made for schoolroom. And what it has in it, it has the whole life cycle from birth to death illustrated. And these are real little boys who are going to be reading this. 5 years old, 4 years old even. I don't know. 6 years old. So they're actually already trained to think about death. It's actually illustrated and spoken about in Yiddish. And I think that's very healthy. I think it's very healthy because for us, this is just one life. We know that the real life, that the long life happens after this life. And so to have that in mind, you're going through life like I am here on a task. And one day this task is going to end, may it not be until 120 or beyond for all of us. And when the task ends, we'll see how I did, okay? But I just was really, as I read this, I was said, oh, it reminds me of the poster we have that even a little child is taught in Judaism to think about death. Not to obsess about it, but just to think about it, to know it exists. Okay, let's continue. We have so much. How are we going to get through this? All right. Shalach yadayv bishlomav chilel biriso. He stretched out his hands against those who were at peace with him, and he profaned his covenant, his bris. So this refers to Achitophel, says Rashi, who stretched out his hands to hurt David, who he had a covenant of friendship with. He had a pact with him of friendship and peace and Torah learning. So why did he do this? So Reb Noson explains that, so interesting, Achitophel had sinned himself, and he didn't want to do tshuva. So I'm using my words here, but it's Reb Noson's ideas. In a massive act of what I would call projection, he pointed the finger at David's sin, for which David had done tshuva, and said that David deserved the death penalty. All of this in order to justify his own hatred of David, which is, of course, his self-hatred projected outwards. Just so fascinating that Reb Noson teaches us in non-psychological language this. Now, this is something that Reb Noson says happens frequently in our times, that somebody does something negative and they want to drag everyone else down with them. And David alternately is invested in lifting up people, lifting them up spiritually, helping them heal their neshamas. And because of this, through David, who of course was a forerunner of Mashiach, because of this, that's why the Geula will happen. So if you want to bring the Geula, you want to bring Mashiach, you want to bring worldwide redemption and peace, lift people up, don't tear them down. And deal with your own stuff and look in the mirror. Okay, it's a lot, but you know what? If Reb Noson 200 years ago can describe what's going on in very, we can really look at this as psychological terms, then certainly we're all capable of this. Okay, I just thought that was fascinating. Okay, I am going to skip some verses because we have gone over. Let's see what we should get to. Okay, I think we will go to 23. Hashlech al Adonai Yehavecha Vehu Yechalka Lecha Lo Yiten Olam Mot Letzadik. This is another one of those beautiful verses. Cast upon Hashem your burden, and he will sustain you. He shall never allow a tzaddik, a righteous person, to falter. David's talking to himself here. He was attacked on all sides, yet he was telling himself to throw this burden, this worry on Hashem, and Hashem will protect me. And he's talking to himself. Hashem will protect you. And he won't allow a tzaddik to fail. Okay? In any situation where you are experiencing distress, worries, anything like this verse, even if you can't say the whole psalm, better to say the whole psalm, but this verse is so helpful. And what I would like to explain to you here is that we have to, in order for this verse to be fully effective, believe that we are tzaddikim too. Now, doesn't mean not recognizing that we all have a far way to go. We need to fix stuff. We need to do tshuva. But our essence, our core, as Rebbe Nachman teaches us, is our Nakuda Tova. And we can view that as being the inner tzaddik. Let those people out there have the inner child. Let us have the inner tzaddik. Let us connect to her. Inner tzaddikis, let us connect to her. And when we say this verse and focus on our good point, what does Rebbe Nachman tell us in the Zamra? Okay, the Rasha is gone, doesn't exist. The wickedness doesn't exist. Only the goodness exists. Okay. Again, not negating the need for all of us to do tshuva, but when we cry out to Hashem, let us believe that we are crying out as tzaddikim. Okay. Again, not that we deserve, but we are connecting to Hashem from that place of our ultimate potential. Okay. All right. Let's do the last verse. Ba'ata Elohim toridem liv shachas anshe damim mirima lo yechetzu yemehem va'ani evtach bach. But you, God, shall lower them to the well of destruction. Men of bloodshed and deceit shall not live half their days. But as for me, I will trust in you. Here we deal mainly with Achitophel and Avshalom, but we're also reminded of Doeg. Doeg lived until 34, so that's half his days. If an average life in the Talmud is 70, that's half his days. Achitophel lived till 33, half his days approximately. And Avshalom, I think, I didn't look it up, but I think early 30s, late 20s. I really should have looked it up. I apologize. That broke David's heart. Of course, I'll look that up. David trusted that he will live out his full lifespan, and he does. He lives out 70 years, and we all know the story of Adam Harishon, the first man. When he was created, he was shown a beautiful, glowing neshama, a beautiful soul. And he said to Hashem, who is this soul? And Hashem says, this is David HaMelech, but he's destined to be born, stillborn. And Adam says, give him 70 years of my life. So Adam was supposed to live till 1,000, but he only lived till 930 years. And I found in the Art Scroll commentary a spectacular comment from Rabbi Menachem Azariah of Pana, who was a great Mekubal, a great Kabbalist, who says that after Adam's sin, he spent the rest of his life in tshuva and tefillah at Erev Vavoker v'Tzaharayim, and these three words, which comprise the prayer services of the day, have the gematria of 930. And also Adam fasted. Tanis, fasting, has the gematria of 930. So we see here that this all comes together in the end, and we see that the final words are of David, Va'ani evtach bach, I will trust in you. And that is really, in a nutshell, the message of this psalm. Everything that David went through, trusted in Hashem. And I just was so in love with this. I'm so sorry we had so many technical difficulties. That's the Yetzer Hara kicking in from the outside, because there's so much more I wanted to get to that we didn't have time from, because I was jumping all over because of these technical issues with Zoom. Hopefully Zoom can help us. Okay, so I'm going to stop here, and then I will answer questions, which I see are in the chat. Hold on one second.